Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Central Virginia fishing report with Ethan Martin at TaleTellers Fly Shop. How you doing, Ethan?
I'm doing great today. How are you doing?
I'm just trying to stay out of trouble. How's everything in the fishiness in your part of the world?
It's been pretty good. Everything has been a little different than what like a normal summer looks like, mainly because we got a pretty good shot of rain this past weekend, which is and a good temperature drop as well. So that's kind of changed some of the dynamic of what like a normal summer fishery here looks like. So the trout streams up in the mountains got a pretty good shot of rain, and it cooled down like way cool for August. So those were definitely fishable, and a couple people I know took advantage of that with some terrestrials. And man, I mean, they caught some pretty nice sized brook trout for this time of the year, and it was, they showed me some pictures, and it had drizzled rain on them like the whole day. So I mean, it's not the type of fishing that everybody wants to do, but I'm fine going out in the rain catching fish. But with that much rain, that kind of throws off the smallmouth bite in terms of our bigger rivers like the James, and then even the tributary streams to the James up high. So they've been pretty muddy and not necessarily high. Like in the winter times, we get muddy and super high water. But the James didn't like spike to be these crazy high levels. It's just super, super muddy. And it's, every day it's getting a little bit better, but my assumption would be even this weekend, it's going to be pretty muddy. And I mean, you can catch fish in that. Last week we had pretty good shot of rain. And so I ended up floating just to see kind of what was going on. And we did actually have a pretty good streamer bite. So it's a little different than what would be a typical summer, because usually, like right now, I mean, this would be peak topwater, cicadas and whatever other bugs you're throwing on the surface. But that's not going to be as effective right now as what like a giant white streamer is going to be fished kind of on the pause. That's been the best way of getting them to actually eat. But I know a guy last week caught a 20-inch smallmouth on a big one of Blaine's Feather Game Changers. He bought it in the shop, and then later on that night, I got a picture of this just enormous smallmouth that he caught on it, just barely hooked. I mean, barely hooked. So it was pretty cool. It's been a different, 2 weeks, or I guess about a week and a half. For what a normal summer is, but it's kind of a nice change of pace.
Yeah, and how long did that little cool break that you just got kind of put the smallies in a funk? Because normally, I guess my experience in the summer is when something like that happens, they kind of are off the bite for a couple of days.
Yeah, and that's what we experienced, and I think it's going to keep going that way because some almost seem to be more susceptible almost to the fronts and that sort of stuff. Like you can have those afternoon thunderstorms and they'll be fine. Like the bite will be super hot after them, or it'll be like super hot before them, or sometimes it's like while the rain is falling, like they're eating. So it's just crazy. The only way you can pattern them is just by going out fishing and then noticing, oh, hey, we're not catching any fish. Like they don't set to one true bite sequence, during all these little afternoon shots of rain that we get. And it's kind of annoying, to be honest, because it's like, it's almost like turkey hunting, like you can't pattern what they're going to do. It's just, they're going to do whatever they want. They're going to eat whenever they want. But I know last week, the bite was just pretty terrible midweek. And we caught a couple fish, and we caught a couple, I think, in a full day float. On one of the float trips, it was like 4 fish, which is just unheard of or not unheard of, but like, that's just not a good day. And, we caught one of them, and, when he came up, there was just like it was just thin. I mean, it was just clear they hadn't been eating that much. And that's just due to, all those changes. They get all these fronts and colder water gets thrown over them, and they just don't eat. And then on the flip side, now here's another weird one, is now the muskies typically are trying to stay as cold as possible, and so they're going to sit in, which they do this all summer. They'll sit in these creek mouths and they'll just sit there. And it's not, you should not catch them, in this sort of environment. Like there's no point in casting a fly to them because just like a trout, their temperature, they can die essentially. They can't cool back down. Is the general rule of thought. And even the muskies, sometimes they'll come and swipe at a fly if you're not paying attention. And I know it's exciting, but it's like, you're trying to keep it away from them. Well, that temperature change, I mean, it had them going nuts. I don't even understand because, sometimes you'll see them and you'll put a fly up there and you're throwing for smallmouth. And a lot of times the smallies will sit in the similar style of water. But, you would not be paying attention and you wouldn't see a muskie or something. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, he's coming to try and annihilate the thing. And so it's interesting how some fish, like smallmouth, they get lockjaw. They're not going to touch anything. They just are going to sit there. And you basically have to dangle it in front of their face for them to want to eat it. But then the muskies got that temperature change. And it was like they turned on hardcore. I mean, if we had no ethics, we were willing to just catch them and potentially kill them, then you could have had a field day for the muskies. But that's not the best thing to do this time of year because the water temps were still in the 80s. They just went from 84 down to like 79. So just that little bit of a temperature change turned them on and turned the smallmouth off. So that's the weird thing with fishing is everything impacts everything. And the only way you can truly figure it out, air quotes, would be by going out and fishing.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because it's a really good segue into our listener question, because what we're really talking about is kind of how that behavior starts to change when things start to cool off, right? So, so Bill wanted to know as we move into September and, if everything holds, right, it should start cooling off and the nights will start getting cooler. What does that do to where you're going to find smallmouth and how you fish for them?
Yeah, so usually September is some of the best topper fishing in our neck of the woods that I've found. So usually you're still going to be topwater oriented, and what you want is all of these little evening thunderstorms to kind of stop happening, so you get consistent weather patterns that are just, it's slowly getting a little bit more cool. The fish are going to notice that, and rather than them just shutting down, they're going to increase the feed. And that's one of the cool things about September is kind of that it's still summer in terms of what it feels like, in the 80s, mid 80s. So the fish are still going to be eating, but you get that cicadas that they'll start dying off. Usually that's, when we start getting more frost, which has been a little weird the past couple of years when that starts. But because like last year we still had good topwater fishing through, it was October and we were still fishing topwater. But so that's going to be the trend. I wouldn't say that September is like straight up, that's the transition month where, they're going to stop eating topwater and they're going to start going into more of a fall behavioral pattern. Most of what you're going to see through September is really going to be lower clear water, and typically lower clear water and still topwater bite is king. So it's a great time to get out and float. Also, you don't have near the amount of people that are out floating. So the pressure typically decreases, which means that the fish get a little bit more stupid. Or maybe not more stupid, but they're more willing to eat a fly. So that's one of the cool things. Now with the lower clear water, that also tends to mean that they're going to be spooky. So you got to use a longer leader, and you'll have to make a little bit farther cast. But that is not true this weekend because it is very chocolately milk looks going down the river. I just drove over it like 5 minutes ago, and it still looks the same. Downstream of Lynchburg, it's going to be muddy. You might have some better options upstream of Lynchburg, or if you were willing to fish lakes, you'd be able to fish this weekend. But that's pretty much it. In terms of September, it's going to be kind of the same game plan, but usually a little bit better. And the fish are going to be still responding, the same way in the James area. Now, some places like I know down towards Matt, Riley, everything does get a little bit colder then, so they're going to be moving a little bit earlier than our fish here on the James.
Yeah, got it. And, folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. If you'll send us a question, usually our Facebook or Instagram feed are the best places to get those questions to us. If we read your question, I'll send you some articulate fly swag and you'll get into a drawing for something cool from the shop at the end of the season. And before I let you hop, Ethan, why don't you let folks know where you're located in Lynchburg and the hours and how to find you on the internet and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, so you can find me most days in the shop. It's in downtown Lynchburg. It's 920 Commerce Street, Lynchburg, Virginia. So that's where I am pretty much every day, unless I'm out fishing or spending time with family. If that's the case, then you can send us a message on Instagram or Facebook. That's TaleTellers Fly Shop on Facebook or TaleTellers VA on Instagram. And I'm the one that answers all of the inquiries or messages or emails. So if you're trying to get info on local conditions or fishing setups, that sort of thing, then that's one of the great ways anymore that you can do that. It's just like sending an Instagram DM or sending an email. And like I said, I'm the one that gets all those. Our phone number, you can call and chat to me or yell at me or do whatever you want.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, folks, the weather is certainly improving from a human comfort perspective. You owe it to yourself to get out there and chase a few tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Ethan.
Tight lines.